Oh
There we
my
go.
gosh. How did you do that?
Just hit record. And then it said, I'm recording it locally so that
Okay.
hopefully it'll be, perfectly fine here on my computer. So I'll get that
Mark
recorded.
will give you a tutorial.
Okay,
While we have
wow.
Mark doing that, also I'm not sure if Barbie has the capacity or Mark does, but can somebody also give me screen sharing permissions because I don't have them right now?
Yeah.
I feel like
Thank
Mark
you.
is the guy at this point. Mark, just do it all. That sounds great. Oh, glad to have you on. Woo.
Somebody's got a lot of paperwork. Sarah Schonauer.
It was probably my dog trying to get in my office, actually. He broke
Yeah,
in.
that's a picture of all my the articles I had to read for graduate school.
Wow.
And it's not even all of them.
Okay, well, somebody needs some joy tonight, I'd say. Okay, cool. All right, so we ready to get started then? I think we have a great group of people here tonight. I'm very, very excited for this presentation tonight. Donna, I don't know if you want to give the intro for Richard Taylor Jr. or if you want me to do it because, I have it pulled up on my screen, but you guys
Go ahead. I'm just
start.
delighted that Richard Taylor Jr. is a member of our board of directors and that he is available to give us some of his inspirational words. And I'll leave the rest of the introduction to Barbie Collins-Young.
Okay, well, you can read all about him online, but I've been telling everybody all day, I'm like, we have a motivational speaker tonight, which we really need. We really need this. Like, he inspired me so much when he spoke to us at our gala, and he just gives you energy. And right now, for the bringing joy to the holidays through the pandemic, this is the man I want to hear from. So we are excited to have him. He has 7 published books, and he also hosts a global podcast. There's a lot more he's done, but I'm going to try to summarize this for you. You could probably all of his books add up to that pile of paperwork that we saw in your the paperwork you had to read. But I think
more
it's worth reading. Yes. He's tailor-made empowerment, and he has a Richard Taylor Jr. brand, and he has several consulting ventures for corporate clients, but really his presentations have just been the most powerful for all of us. He's a sought-after speaker, and he brings an empowering message of victory by creating a unique way to make the conversation of mental health easier and digestible for all of his audiences. So we can talk a little bit more about him at the end, but I feel like you guys really want to hear about Richard and his goal to create safe spaces for difficult conversations and to encourage empathy in society that is clouded with apathy. So let's just hear a big round of applause for Richard Taylor Jr. Bring your presentation to us.
Thank you so much, Barbie. Good evening, everybody. I know we got our NAMI Eastside family here and our Evergreen Health family as well. And I love it because we're in a very intimate space right now, right? So thank you to Mark, Leanne, Kathy, Leslie, and Sarah, all of you all in the space right now. I'm happy to have you all here. And then, of course, we're recording too, right? So we got some folks who might catch this on the back end, and thank you as well. Barbie, thank you for that amazing introduction, and thank you as well, Donna. One thing that was left out is that I am an avid Christmas celebrator. My tree has been up for 7.5 weeks now, maybe 8, something like that. Hallmark has received all of my attention since October when they decided to start releasing a host of new movies. And if you can't tell, I wore Christmas red for our time together tonight. So I'm really excited to be here with you all. Look, I know we've got a very intimate space. And with our conversation tonight, I want to be very intentional. I know we got about 50 minutes, and I know you all have worked hard all day. And I want to make sure I get you out of here in a respectable time so that you can go on and live your life. And of course, too, the reality is that we are several days out from Christmas, which means that most of us have checked out or are checking out. And with that being said, I want to be really intentional about our time, but I am really excited. Thank you so much to Donna, to Barbie, and to both Nami and Evergreen for just this time together. As Barbie stated, author of 7 books, and I'm going to flash them really quickly across the screen as we go through: Brainchild, Unashamed, The Process of Reconstruction, Between the Dream is my 2nd book. It's also the title of my podcast, everywhere podcasts can be heard. Love Between My Scars, which is my 3rd book. I'm going to reference this a little bit in our conversation tonight. I started working with a lot of our student groups as young as 3rd grade, and I wanted to be really mindful. So I ended up creating a student edition to the Between the Dream book. And then in 2019, I released my 5th book, The Other Side, Freedom from Depression and Suicide. I will be referencing this in our conversation tonight as we talk about finding joy through the pandemic holidays. And then over the last maybe 3 or 4 years, I've had the opportunity to start working with a lot more of our Spanish-speaking population. So with that being said, between New Jersey, New York, California, Oregon, New Mexico, and Texas, and then also Puerto Rico, I started translating my work over as well. So wanted to test it out originally with The Other Side, and now I'm doing it with the rest of my books. And then this year, released the 31 Days of Power, a simplified approach to everyday mental health. This book was inspired off of work that I have been doing from Mental Health Awareness Month, which we have 31 days in the month of May. And I wanted to be intentional around creating conversations just from that web series that I've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years. I will be referencing that book tonight as well. As Barbie stated, a speaker, author, motivation is one thing for me, right? But if I'm honest, I understand that motivation is euphoric. So with that being the case, I think a lot of times I really like to center my work around transformation, right? From this standpoint of not just having a high for the moment and us being, riding on that high, but rather to say, how can we take that and transition and take some steps to make sure that in where we're moving and where we're going, we are fully transformed. We are taking the time to heal, to seek freedom, to seek a new path, and to stay on track with that, right? Because here's the reality, right? Motivation fades, right? And I think that while motivation serves its place, I'm very intentional around what does it look like to be able to take that motivation and to transfer it into a space to say, hey, I have completely made changes and transformation and trying to be something more, something greater, and to see the fullness of where I can be. So with that being the case, as I present to you all tonight, I want us to keep that in mind. Several things that I want to just us to remember as we go through this time frame. We won't have all the answers tonight, and that's okay though, right? That is totally fine. I told you I'm going to reference several books tonight. The first one that I want to talk about, or at least reference, is the Love Between My Scars book. I have a chapter in here called Take Off the Mask. One of the things that I'm always big on in my presentations is us making sure that we take the time as we're in this intimate space together to take off our mask. This can look like several different things. This can be us taking off the mask and being vulnerable in conversation with each other. If you got things that you want to say to me in the private chat, I'm totally fine with that. Or sometimes taking off the mask can simply look like reflection on our own time, one-on-one, whether in this space or once you leave, right? I want to encourage you in whatever way, shape, or form to take off the mask for yourself, because I truly believe that as we have this conversation tonight to talk about finding joy, a portion of us finding joy will come with taking off the mask. The next thing that I really want to encourage us to do is to understand that as we go through some of this conversation tonight, I'm 100% sure that some of the things that are going to be presented here are things that we've already heard. But one of the things that I know about us, myself included, as humans, is that knowledge and application sometimes miss each other, right? So as we bridge the gap between what we know and what we choose to apply, can we take the time tonight to make sure that in this, while we know it, let's just ask ourselves that simple question: am I applying this, or am I applying it to the fullest? And then finally, listen, I just hope that as you take away from this, you might not be able to take something from everything that's stated, but if there's one thing that sticks out to you, I just want to encourage you to dive deeper into that, right? Take the time over this holiday season, over this conversation, and even throughout 2022 to take some time to really just be intentional within that space. As Barbie stated, my name is Richard Taylor Jr. I am a speaker and author, a heavy mental health advocate, a podcaster. I wear a lot of hats, right? But at the end of the day, if titles and labels and positions mean nothing to me, what it really boils down to for me personally is just I'm a person that cares for people, and I want to see people do the best. And that comes from my own struggles, that comes from my own story. And I will share a little bit of that tonight. So as I talked about that component of taking off the mask, that's something big for me, because for a very long time I hid behind masks, right? So been living in, I think actually December 29th or 30th will make a full 5 years since I've been in the Seattle area. Born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, and during my time in Chicago, I think that's where I really got a lot of what I've been able to gain from the education side of mental health, but also from the personal and lived experience standpoint of it. And during that first 28 years in Chicago, literally grew up dealing with bullying. And from the bullying that I experienced transferring out of a private Christian school into my first public school was this roasting culture that we had. Jokes were great. I'm all for it. But in that, what ended up happening was I found myself in this transition to where it became a lot more bullying. It became a lot more malicious intent. One day in particular, during 6th grade, I maybe was 10 or 11 at the time, I got beat up by my bullies during recess. And from that, it was essentially a conversation of, we did this to you because you couldn't defend yourself, so we do with you as we please. And a big part of me not being able to defend myself during that time frame had to do with the fact that I was overweight. My weight was the very thing that they would pick on me on or for during that time frame. And it led to a host of anxiety. It led to depression. Now, here's the reality. During this time frame, I did not identify it as depression or anxiety because of the fact that I didn't know that that's what it was, right? You're talking about, like I said, 10 or 11 years old, growing up in the inner city of Chicago. We didn't have conversations around mental health, definitely not in my community. If I'm being completely honest with you, this was not something that was discussed. And so because of that, I did not realize what I was going through, right? We were lucky if we had a therapist or a counselor on staff at our school. But then beyond that too, I grew up in a few different environments that really skewed the way that I learned about mental and emotional health, right? The first piece being that I grew up in the church. I'm a singer now. I actually lead worship in the city of Seattle at a church down there. But during that time frame of growing up as a kid, I did not know that this whole notion of you're not praying hard enough was a thing, right? And then, of course, there's the no snitch clause that comes from the family dynamic. We've got to save our face to save our butts, right? And so what happens in this house stays in this house. These are all different quotes that I heard growing up. My granddad is from Possum Trot, Mississippi. I kid you all not. This is a legitimate place. You got to look it up. It sits right outside of Pontotoc, Mississippi. And so my granddad, coming from Possum Trot, he was the son of slaves. He saw his brother get lynched. And the next day, the folks that did it were coming for him and my 3 other great uncles. They fled on a train up to Chicago. My granddad came to Chicago with a 3rd grade education at the age of 17 years old. And from that, I was always told that my ancestors dealt with worse. And so because of that, I had nothing to complain about. And then, of course, there's the beauty of I'm giving you everything that you need. You've got a roof over your head. You've got all of these things provided. And because of that, you're not struggling mentally or emotionally. You have nothing to be sad about, as if monetary or provision in that way was the only thing that had some kind of precedence over how I receive things mentally and emotionally. So if I'm honest with you all and taking off my mask, I was crippled for a very long time within that. And that kind of goes into, by the time that I was being bullied, in one particular day in class, getting jumped by my bullies in the boys' bathroom because of the fact that I couldn't defend myself with my weight, and, you know, being an easy target for the jocks in my school. One of the things that ended up taking place was that as I was headed home that day on the school bus, I found myself in this really interesting space where I said to myself, if there was one thing that I could do to change it, it would be for me to be smaller. I didn't know about losing weight at the time, but in the spirit of taking off my mask and being completely honest, I went home that day and I said to myself, if I could just cut some of the fat off of my body, everything would be okay. And I did that before my mom and dad got home from work, before my brother got in from school. And I found myself in a really interesting space where this was the open doorway to what we identify as self-mutilation. And over the next 10 years, from the age of 10 to 20, what I found myself dealing with was not only cutting, but it started transitioning into the space of questioning my purpose in life. Why am I here? Right? I was miserable. But the crazy part is, if you can't tell by now, I'm sitting here in the booth that I use in Edmonds, Washington for my podcast and for my speeches. It's a 6x6. I'm an extroverted extrovert. I'm trying not to bounce off the walls too much right now to scare y'all, because I know we passed 7 o'clock. But here's the reality. I carry a ton of energy. I've always been one of those people that I cheer everybody up. I'm everybody else's cheerleader. And I'm also the one that's rooting folks on. And I didn't have that same support for me. So this was me back then as this extrovert, high energy, but also high levels of anxiety. And so because of that, what I found myself dealing with and struggling with for a very long time was this space of, by the time my parents transferred me out of that school that I got bullied in 6th grade and moved into the 7th and 8th grade year, shot up in height, lost weight, got into great shape. And by my freshman year, becoming a standout football player in the sport of football. Now, listen, I know our Hawks are playing right now. We're Seattle's fans. I can say this because I got a chance to be in camps with him. I was Russell Wilson before Russell Wilson was Russell Wilson. We are the same age. We were a part of the same class. And I got a chance to be at several quarterback camps with Russ. And I was that for a long time. Unfortunately, as I went throughout high school, even though I had scholarship offers galore, freshman, sophomore, junior year, by the time my senior year rolled around, found out that I had an enlarged heart. And because of this was during the time 2005, 2006, where athletes were passing out on the field, passing out on the court from cardiac issues. I became too much of a risk and a liability. Now, during this time, it was really interesting. I finally had a new mask to hide behind, which was the sport of football. I was the big time jock on campus. Everything was great externally, but internally, I struggled with purpose. I struggled with when it came to the hopelessness. I struggled when it came to finding joy. Like, I was able to put on a very good face, but I was not able to translate that when it came to like the realities of what I was dealing with. And so by the time senior year rolled around, I took a hit on the field that landed me in the hospital. This is how we found out about my heart. This is how I was able to get to a space where I was now introduced with this position of, I'm not going to be able to play the sport that I love anymore. My mom and dad did not make a lot of money. We grew up for a little bit with a decent income. My parents had some struggles that led us to living in essentially poverty. And so with that being the case, the little bit of money that my mom and dad did have, myself and my 2 younger brothers, they were always really intentional around trying to make sure that they kept us in activities that would keep us off the street and keep us, at least if for nothing else, engaged, I would say, with productivity. And so for me, that was football. My mom and dad did not have a lot of money, but they invested money into the camps that they had. So by the time that this had taken place, and even though I had all of these scholarship offers, I felt like I had become a failure in my parents' eyes, not to mention the fact that a big part of my validation came from the fact that I'm my father's namesake. And so within that, I never felt like I was able to live up to his expectations We had our own issues back and forth when it came to how he thought I should grow up and how I was trying to figure myself out in the process. I jokingly say I was my parents' experimental child growing up, and I still believe that to a degree. And so with that being the case, though, I was confused. I didn't know who to open up to. I didn't know how to open up because of all of these myths that I had heard around mental health and everything else. And so with this being the case, by the time I got to college, I really started to struggle even more. After not being able to play football, I had to go in through what we would call the regular way to school. I ended up getting accepted into Northern Illinois University off of what was called the Chance program. Now, Chance program was really interesting because it was a program that essentially you were either brought in from a space of you had a decent GPA and low ACT or SAT scores, or vice versa. And so for me, what ended up taking place is that while my GPA was really high, I struggled when it came to standardized testing. This had been a thing for me all of my life, right? Once again, validation, seeking acceptance, I felt like the standardized test was basically the predicator for me when it came to my ability in life, what I'd be able to do, how smart I was, and how adequate I was. And so because of that, I struggled very heavily. I took the ACT prep before ever taking the ACT exam, took the ACT exam 3 times after taking the prep, got a 17 the first time, a 16 the second time, and a 15 the third time. If you know anything about the ACT, those are very, very low scores. And so for me, I just felt inadequate. I felt that heavy amount of imposter syndrome creeping on at a very early stage while I was walking into the space of this college campus, not knowing what to do and not knowing where to go, right? And so we get here, I'm 18 years old on a college campus now, feeling behind. And as things took off, August of 2006, the next 18 months, my life spiraled out of control completely, right? Complete downward spiral from the standpoint of I got on campus, first 3 semesters of school, 1.6 GPA, 1.5 and 1.4. And in that order, as it happened, I was now on academic probation, getting ready to get kicked out of school because I had been on probation for 2 semesters straight. And in that, the final semester, they send you a letter letting you know that you're going to be academically dismissed by the end of that semester if you're not off of probation. And so for me, imposter syndrome's hitting again. But by this time, I've been highly suicidal. I started to question the purpose in my life. Even while I was playing football in high school, there were days and times where I just felt like I just felt like I did not belong or I did not deserve to be here, right? And so in this, what I found myself dealing with when I got to the college campus wasn't just the failing grades, but it was also the fact that I let myself go from a standpoint of not knowing what was going on. I put so much into football. I thought that I literally thought I was a one-trick pony. Like I said, I'm going to take my mask off. I'm going to be honest with y'all, family. You were my last speech for the year, right? I have had a ton of groups that I've been in, and I'm like, you know what? We're a few days before Christmas. I'm airing it all out tonight, right? This was me. I felt like a failure in that space, but then also too, I did not care anymore, right? And so with me not caring, what ended up taking place after I found out that I couldn't play football anymore is that I ate myself into a fit, right? I had a really bad relationship with food. And from this, I went from 200 pounds to 370 pounds from August of 2006 to January of 2008, right? And this was me, right? This was a huge part of my struggle. Food became comfort for me. And as food became comfort for me, my weight shot up, my physical health got very bad to the point where at one point in time, I think I was 302 over 256 when it came to my systolic and diastolic blood pressure level. And so I was not in a really good space. And then you couple that with the fact that once again, seeking out acceptance, seeking out validation, I ended up getting into a relationship during that time where for the next year and a half, I'd become the victim of domestic abuse, right? One of the things that I'm a firm believer of is that sometimes in spaces of desperation, we will open the doorway to things of degradation, right? Things that will degrade us and who we are as people and some of the struggles that we have. And that's why we're here tonight, right? Because when we talk about the pandemic, right, it is a form of trauma. It is a form of us having these moments of desperation. For some of us, it's caused hopelessness. For some of us, it's caused us to feel like, what the heck is next, right? We are now dealing with the Omicron variant, trying to figure out what's happening next. Plans are being altered. So many things are happening, and that constant change for some of us is bringing on certain triggers, certain traumas, and because of it, we don't know how to function all the time, right? And if we're honest, these different pile-ons of life can lead to the feeling of hopelessness, and that was me, and that's why I'm here tonight, right? And so for me, finally, Dr. King Day of 2008, if I'm not mistaken, the exact date was January 21st of 2008. Dr. King Day was celebrated that day. During that time, the relationship that I was in really kind of led me to a really bad place. The young lady that I was with at the time, we lived in the same college dorm hall on the same floor, got into an argument after I found out some things that really just broke me. And in that, we get into this space where I'm like, if you don't give a care about me and I don't give a care about me, I had just finished washing dishes. And in me washing dishes, I had a sharp knife in my hand, went down my wrist 5 times. Henceforth, the title of that book, Love Between My Scars. The word love now sits between the scars of my final suicide attempt. And so from this, I black out. I wake up in the ER at the hospital right around my college's campus. And from there, I have a doctor letting me know that I tapped one of the main vessels at the top of my wrist and no blood would come out. He says to me, Mr. Taylor, you've got a purpose in life and you need to figure out what it is. And little did he know that purpose was the very thing that I had struggled with for so long. And so slept it off that day, wake up the next morning, and in me waking up, what I end up finding out is that my story is in the school newspaper. Why is that? Because of the fact that usually with the police beat area in the school newspaper, they let you know about what takes place either on campus or around the campus. And so for me, a portion of my story was in there, right? Once again, validation, acceptance, hiding behind masks. That story took a greater fold because of the fact that I never wanted folks to see me for the real struggle that I was in, for what I had been going through. And so I always hid behind being highly active. I always hid behind trying to make sure that I was helping everybody else. I was seen in what I was doing. So this led to me in this space during this time, while nobody knew what I was going through internally. I was the president of a fraternity. I was the president of my school's choir. I also sat on the executive board for that same choir, and then also worked in the residence hall and was a part of student activity association, student government, and then the campus activity board. And so with this, all of these different components had placed me in a position while I was in college where I was highly seen, highly visible. So when my story hit, this is when social media really started to take storm. And in that, folks were sharing about what had taken place. And in my mind, I said, after I saw that, there's no way that I'm walking back onto this campus and being seen by this people, because the embarrassment is just too much. And so from there, what I ended up finding myself doing, I was in this predicament where I said, I either need to do this again and I'm going to succeed this time, or I'm going to drop out from school and become another statistic. And so within that, I ended up getting a call that same day from a gentleman by the name of Quincy Payton. At the time, Quincy was working as the academic advisor for my college's student support service TRIO program. He reaches out to me. He's like, Richard, I know I don't know you, but I've seen you around campus, and I want to let you know that you made a mistake, but this does not have to be the end of your life. And in that, Quincy's time in that space with me was the first time that I felt like, even in all of my mess and what I had experienced and me lacking joy, me feeling hopeless, this is the first time somebody saw me and gave me an opportunity and didn't judge me. And so from there, Quincy's help and investment over the next 5 months put me in a position to where he put me around the right tutors, around the right mentors, and around the right people. I was able to get my GPA up from a 1.4 to a 2.39 with straight A's on that semester. And I said to myself, if I can do this in this one area of my life, then maybe, just maybe, I can start doing it in others. And so in this, what I started doing, not by choice, if I'm being honest, I was forced by the dean of students, in order to stay in school, to go and seek out counseling at my school's counseling department. And from there, I really started to get a hold on my mental and emotional, understanding that I wasn't crazy. All of these negative labels that I had been placed with and that I had placed on myself weren't true, but really being able to unpack the traumas and the issues that I had dealt with. And from there, it started an uptick. That is a fraction of my story. I just want to let you know that before we get into this conversation tonight, brief PowerPoint that I want to present to you all, because I'm not about to PowerPoint y'all to death right before Christmas, right? But with this brief conversation, this is why I'm so passionate about the work around mental health, because of my own experience. And not only because of the experience, but because I've been able to overcome and now help others do the same. Traveling across the country with colleges, corporations, and everybody in between, simply to get folks on par with their mental and emotional and mobilize us as we move forward in every season of life. So that being said, if I may, I would love to jump into our quick conversation tonight around finding joy in the pandemic holidays, right? And so I love this title. Donna, thank you so much for presenting us with this and giving me a good challenge to talk about. I told you I'm referencing several books tonight. Let's jump into the 31 Days of Power as we move into this time together. I understand that we're all in different seasons, in different places. Maybe your struggle or where you are isn't the same as somebody else's. It's okay, because here's the reality. We all go through at different times in different ways. But the first point that I want to give you all comes from the first chapter of this book, which is this: simply put, we all have a mental health, right? We all have mental health, right? I remember when I first presented this, I was at a conference for a bunch of mental health care professionals about 3 years ago in the state of Virginia. And it was a response to a question that I had gotten after my keynote. And I remember, I don't know why it just came to me this way. And I was like, yeah, we all have a mental health. It totally makes sense. One lady jumps up, I mean, super angry and aggressive, just like, I don't have mental health issues. What are you talking about? And I was like, I never said that we have mental health issues. I simply said that we all have a mental health. The same way that we all have a physical health, right? The same way that our physical health exists, so does our mental. And I had to break this down for them on a base level when it came to the fact, this is my goal in my work, right? I like to simplify conversations, because here's the reality. If we talk about being advocates and wanting to reach people and help folks, truthfully, we've got to be mindful of being able to break it down, right? And here's the beauty: having a mental health isn't a bad thing, right? Now, this doesn't mean that we have mental health issues. And I want to be very, very mindful, but also very caring in this space to say, if we have been diagnosed with a struggle, with an issue or diagnosis, I really want to speak truth to power in the reality that even with a diagnosis, even with our mental health struggles and issues, it does not take away from the fact that you still got a great purpose in life. It does not take away from your capability and what you're going to be able to do in this life. You're still beautiful. You're still worthy. All of the good things that you want to believe about yourself, that you hope to be true, they are true even with your struggle. You are more than the sum of your diagnosis. And I want to make sure that we are very clear. As I've had this conversation for the last year around we all have a mental health, I think this is so important, right? When we talk about destigmatizing mental health in the conversations, one of the things that we've got to do is stop categorizing it from a space of, oh, this person struggles, this person has issues, this person has a diagnosis, but rather taking the space to say, hey, you know what? Maybe they've been triggered in a way that I haven't. And in this, I want to be very careful, right? Because all it takes is us being vulnerable in the right situation or the wrong situation. And in this, we can start to see issues arise that we never did before, i.e. COVID, right? I can't tell you how many people that I talked to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when I got started in this work around mental health, who came to me mid 2020 and was like, Richard, that depression thing that you talked about, that anxiety piece, that's real. I'm dealing with it right now as I've lost my job, or I'm dealing with grief as I've lost family members, whatever it might be. Listen, I want to let us know that we are all equal in this space of having a mental health, whether we've been diagnosed or not. Each of us can struggle. And in this, I just want us to be very mindful and use this as a space to not only empathize with each other, but start to ask the question, how can I be more intentional when helping another person? Because maybe in you empathizing and showing love in action and being intentional, your action can actually lead to the joy that somebody needs, not just for the pandemic holiday, right? But also as we move into 2022, when we talk about what's next, right? What's our new norm, right? Just like our physical health, when it's not invested into, we can see issues arise. And here's the reality. That doesn't always happen necessarily right from the get-go. Sometimes it takes time, but I believe that in this space, when we are not invested and when we're not making the proper investments over a period of time, we can start to see things become a little rocky and a little shaky. Having a mental health is not a bad thing, right? Your mind, I personally believe, is beautiful and it should be treated as such, right? I want to talk real quick, right? When we talk about finding joy during the pandemic holidays, right? One of the things that we've got to be mindful of is the anxiety. Now, anxiety for us can be caused in a multitude of ways, right? Anxiety can come from our experiences. For some of us, it's uncharted territory, right? And it's easy to start feeling anxious, or maybe you feel like you're lost. You might even feel like you're failing or falling behind, right? But in that anxiety, what happens is that we start to lose the joy because our minds are racing so much. We hit that fight or flight that we talk about a lot. But in this, I just want to talk about some simple things that we can start to put into place to help us combat that anxiety and not allow it to steal our joy during this moment, right? So how do we combat the anxious thoughts and feelings? Like I said, you might know it already, but let's talk about application. I want to encourage you all to continue to be mindful of fact-checking your thoughts, right? Fact-checking every thought, not just some, but all of the thoughts that come through your head during the process of whatever it is that you might be experiencing at that time. And why am I saying this? We've got to remember that not every intrusive or overwhelming thought is signaling a legitimate reason for us to worry. But I know that with the pressures of life, and maybe even with the intensity of the experience and the moment, it can feel that way. And so with that being said, right, I just want to remind you all that you have permission to take the time to fact check each of those thoughts. Now, hear me. This is not to say that you aren't having a valid feeling, but it is to say that in you fact checking your thoughts, you have the opportunity to separate a valid feeling from, is this feeling that I'm having that is valid that I'm feeling? Is it true about me? Is it true about who I am? Is it true about where I'm headed, right? What we will tend to find is that feelings are fickle. And in the feelings being fickle, we can sometimes start to lose hope and or joy because of the fact that we've given into the thought of a fickle feeling, not realizing that it wasn't our truth, right? It wasn't true about who we are, where we are, or where we're headed. It's a moment in time, and we've got to be able to fact check this and start speaking truth, which leads me to my next point. I want to encourage you all in the spaces and the moments where you start to feel anxious during this holiday season for whatever reason. Maybe you're going to be around family members that you haven't seen it around. Maybe there are people who are a trigger for you, whatever it is. Let's take the time to start relabeling our thoughts on the experience at hand, right? We already know this. Fight or flight feelings can definitely fool us into overreacting or responding maybe unfavorably to what's really happening as we navigate our respective processes. If you're anything like me, I'm a massive overthinker. I know for me personally, I will create situations in my mind that do not exist. And by the time I'm done running with the thought, I'm ready to fight everybody in sight. And the reality is that in this, I have labeled or falsely labeled the experience at hand. And so I want to encourage you all to relabel the thoughts in your experience. What does this look like? Instead of taking a woe is me approach or a why is this happening to me approach, maybe simply starting to implement a thought process of, what is this trying to teach me? So instead of saying, why is this happening? Maybe we start to look at it as, what am I supposed to be learning here? What is this supposed to teach me? As we take the time to do simple tweaks and simple relabeling of our thoughts on these experiences, what we will tend to find is that sometimes our joy and our hope, or sometimes just the strength to fight through another day, will come from the fact that we've decided to take a different approach and perspective from what we normally do. I think in this, I want to also encourage us, right, with our mood checks, right? I'm a millennial, y'all, so I use a lot of slang. I'm also from Chicago, so I code switch a lot and use a lot of slang too, right? One of the big things, if you're on TikTok or if you're on Instagram, you will see us talk a lot about moods and vibes, right? So I'm really big on checking our moods, and I like to associate our moods with emotions, right? One of the things that we will find is that with our moods, it can definitely be linked to what we're going through at the time. So uncertainty during times of our process is very normal, right? We're going into this holiday season. It looks different from what we've had before. If you're anything like me, maybe you're dealing with grief. I've been dealing with it on a very heavy, extensive level, starting from literally 3.5 weeks ago. I was driving to SeaTac, getting ready to park my car so that I can check in through TSA, hop on a red-eye flight to go speak at Rutgers University. And in the process of that, I get a call from my mother letting me know that one of my aunts had passed away from sickle cell. Literally, over the next 13 days, 3 more deaths from individuals that I knew had followed, right? And that grief hit me. And I noticed that in this moment in time, my emotions started to change, right? Some of us are dealing with grief during the holidays. Maybe it doesn't come through the loss of a person, right? Maybe your grief comes through the fact that life has changed. Look, me personally, I'm a Chicago kid. I love my family. I love my parents. Haven't been able to be with them. Haven't been able to see them as much as I want to. That has affected me. And for you, it might be the same way. For some of us, it could be the loss of a job. It could be the loss of a lifestyle. Whatever it is, it has such a play and such an effect on our emotions, right? And I just want to let you know, giving you permission tonight to understand and to embrace the fact that uncertainty during your process is normal, right? And here's my thing. In this, I understand that we are people that love power. We are people that love control. I just want to keep you reminded that just because you can't control the situation doesn't mean you can't take the time to control yourself. So what am I encouraging you to do? Take the time to do heart checks when needed, right? Asking yourself 3 simple questions. Am I experiencing burnout? Am I lacking motivation right now? And have I been struggling in silence? I would even throw in there, even asking yourself the question from time to time, do I feel hopeless? Have I experienced hopelessness, right? And I want to give you a few solid tips that I believe can help you during this time frame. The first is this. We talk about embracing the power of community. This is a chapter in this book and then also in this book as well, right? We as humans are relational beings despite our personality types, introverted, extroverted, ambivert. We can go down the full list. Enneagrams are all that the stuff that we talk about when it comes to personality. Doesn't matter. We as human beings are relational beings, right? And I want us to keep that in mind when it comes to the fact that we all need somebody to lean on. Look, studies have already shown that there are benefits to attempting to having at least one meaningful connection a day. So no matter what your personality type is, I want to keep us reminded to make sure that we're staying connected. I want to take this a step deeper. I've been having some really good conversations lately with some folks, and this has really challenged me in my thinking and diving deeper into the conversations around the power of community. 2 things I really want to encourage us to do when we talk about being able to find joy and hope, specifically from the help of our community. I want to make sure that we are being specific about what we need with the people that are in our lives. One of the disconnects of hope and joy that I've noticed has been that a lot of times we are with people and we're having fun with them from a standpoint of they keep us comfortable. We're present with them from a standpoint of we're doing activities. But a lot of times when it comes to like, hey, this is what I specifically need, we're not always as intentional or as quick to speak on that. The second thing that I believe is even more important than that is that in order for us to be specific with our people, we got to make sure that we're being honest with our people. And what do I mean by this? We cannot tell half truths, right? When it comes to our struggle, when it comes to where we are in life, when it comes to true healing and transformation, we're not going to be able to heal on half truths. So part of finding joy, I truly believe, is going to come from this space of, look, I have to make the decision that I no longer want to live with this. And I need to be completely honest about where I am, what I've been dealing with, and how I'm struggling within this space, right? You are not weak for admitting that you're in a season of struggle and that you need help balancing everything that you're currently carrying. I just want to keep us reminded in that. The next thing I want to encourage, right, is an identity check. Taking time to look at ourselves, likes, dislikes, traumas, triggers, people around us, situations, all of these different things, right? Embrace the opportunity to learn yourself in this pandemic season. Who have you become? What have you become? What are some things that you've picked up? What are some things that you dropped off, right? How do you deal with the moments of imposter syndrome and confidently stand in power. Why am I mentioning imposter syndrome? Because I know that with the challenge of COVID, with the challenge of the pandemic, one of the big things that we're finding now is that we have been challenged to the point where we start to question our capability. We start to question whether or not we belong here, whether or not we should be here, whether or not we're good enough. And I just want to let you know that you are. Imposter syndrome is lying to you, right? So in us being able to find our identity, we can stand firm and strong on who we are and even who we're becoming without giving into the voice of the imposter syndrome, right? Few final things that I want to leave you all with. First and foremost, during this time, let's create a healthy schedule. We don't have to commit to everything. We don't have to commit to everybody, but I also want to say, let's take the time to take care of ourselves in this process. And in that, let's remember that our current circumstance is only temporary. I know how we are as humans, how we are as people. It's easy to look at where we are and think that, man, I'm going to be in this forever. I am going to have to deal with this for the rest of my life. That is not the truth. That is not the case. This is temporary, right? And in this takes me right into one of the final points that I want to give you all that comes from the Other Side book. That is the first chapter. There is hope, right? And so one of the things that I find really interesting about hope is that hope can be marketed in a host of ways, right? Hope can be marketed as, look, I told you, I was not kidding when I said I've been in the holiday spirit for a very long time, right? And so with this, I've started watching Hallmark and Lifetime Christmas movies a while ago. It led me to start watching the channel year round. Hope can sometimes be presented in these movies, right? Small town girl who's now living in a big city at a big firm, going back home, save mom and dad, struggling business. In the process, meets the love of her life, who's the person that's in charge of taking down mom and dad's small business. And in this, she falls in love in 3 days and everything is good. The business is saved. Life is great. Boom, there's hope, right? If we took this to the realm of sports, I know our Seahawks are in a dogfight right now with the Rams. We can look at hope from the standpoint as the walk-off touchdown. We can look at hope from the standpoint as the walk-off grand slam home run. We can look at hope as the game-winning shot. But what if that is not hope? What if hope looks a little different? What if hope in the Hallmark and Lifetime love stories, Christmas or other, is not just the girl coming into the space with the guy and falling in love in 3 days? What if she takes some time to say, hey, you know what? I need to know, what does your credit look like? How do you deal with anger? How do you deal with trauma? Do you have children around the world that nobody knows about? What if it is not necessarily mom and dad's small business being saved? What if we got to look at the small business and say, hey, is it time to elevate in 2021? Do we need to get you all on social media? Can you not run it the same way anymore? What if hope, small baby steps done right? What if it's not the game-winning shot? What if it's 2 free throws to tie it? What if it's not the touchdown? What if it's just the first down or the field goal to get us in position to go and win? What if hope is small baby steps in whatever capacity in our life done right over a consistent, extended period of time, right? Even though many of our recent experiences have given us opportunities to feel hopeless, I truly do believe that hope still exists. But what if we need to reframe our perspective on hope? What if we need to reframe our expectations that lead us to hope, that can evolve into joy? What if we have overlooked some very small actions or very small victories in our life that were actually a sign for us to say, it's not hopeless, I'm on the right track? But because our expectation was here and because we were looking here and not where we were in the moment, we missed out on some opportunities of hope. I just want to encourage you all with this idea that your best days are ahead of you, right? But in that, it's okay for us to embrace humble expectations in the moment. I talked about this on an Instagram live that I did a few weeks ago around this idea that sometimes we lose joy and we start to feel hopeless because expectations aren't always humble, right? We are shooting here instead of being here to say, hey, let me start this on a smaller scale and realize and understand and embrace the idea that even though it's small in my eyes, it's leading to something greater, right? And I want to just leave you all with this, though. You are not alone, right? Your Evergreen Health family, your NAMI Eastside family, no matter where you come from tonight, listening to this they are here from you, right? So please do not be afraid to reach out for support. I want to let you all know that you deserve community, right? I know some of us, we might struggle with that piece of like, oh, well, I don't want to be a burden, or I don't want to be this, or I don't want to be that. You're none of that, right? You are a needed individual with a legitimate concern and a legitimate life that deserves to be supported in wherever you are. Finally, I'll leave you all with my information. I would love to stay in touch with you all. That's my Instagram, my LinkedIn, my podcast. The Between the Dream podcast can be heard everywhere podcasts are available. And as we close this conversation out, I actually want to close with a quote that I like to use from the Between the Dream book and podcast. It simply says, you're not losing in life, you're not failing, you're simply between the dream. What is between the dream? For me, between the dream is the point between our present moment, where we currently are, and our promise, where we will be. I like to call that area in between the process. Between the dream is the process. I know a lot of times it's very easy to look and think that folks are living from mountaintop to mountaintop, victory to victory, high to high, but there are different valleys, there are different lows within the process. And in this, I just want to encourage you all to embrace your respective process, because I believe that as you do, you will find joy within there, right? Between the dream is the process. I'm a firm believer that when you embrace your process, you embrace your progress. And when you embrace your progress, you will begin to walk into every promise, purpose, and plan meant for your life. Evergreen Health family, NAMI Eastside family, thank you all so much for your time. You're not losing in life. You're not failing. You're simply between the dream.
Wow. Richard, can you do that one more time?
Wait, which part?
I don't know. It just felt so good. I think we all love that. I keep getting little private messages like, oh my gosh, you're so amazing. So thank you so much for bringing your energy to us tonight. It was remarkable. So thank you. I'm hoping we can have a couple conversations.
I really like the idea of reframing expectations. I think that is something that everybody can take away with them, because we have such high expectations for either the year or for the holidays, or what we're going to be able to accomplish in very limited time. I mean, it really resonates for me.
Thank you for sharing that, Donna. Sorry, Barbie. I just wanted to say real quick to that. Honestly, so I had a 8-city tour between November and December, and went to a bunch of different colleges. And one of the like themes that kept sticking out for me as we went through is this idea, definitely with the pandemic, is that we're not only going to have to rescale our expectations, but I think we're going to have to learn that in rescaling our expectations, the reality is that with things ever changing, I think that how we look at hope and expectations within that, we've got to be able to consistently adapt an expectation as well. And that's not a bad thing, right? I jokingly said that. So maybe that looks like you don't get the 7-day island trip to Hawaii right now. Maybe it's just 2 days in the mountain over in Leavenworth, watching them light the tree up, or going to Snowflake Land, whatever it is, right? What does it look like in there? So thank you so much for that, Donna.
And I have to laugh because you're talking about the Seahawks, and I was feeling kind of bummed because I was looking at the score right at that time, because I'm kind of a football fan. But then I noticed like my fantasy football team had won. So I was like, reframe that. I didn't have any Seahawks on my team, so it's okay. But I think that's very true as we look at what we all know as our holiday traditions. It's time to reframe all of that and say, like, we need to really reframe what the holidays mean to us. And you had a couple other pieces in here, but the fact that community can really bring you so much, and what we do for the community. I've seen so many people get so much joy out of just doing something for others or doing something for an organization right now. It feels like that is really, really important to bring people joy. And I feel it myself. So I'm just watching people do that and fact checking your thoughts. God, and there's another really golden nugget in there. I love that. Like, is that really true? Because we're probably a lot alike, Richard. I can create all kinds of scenarios and be like, what's the worst case scenario that's going to happen in my head? But is that true? Probably not. And your very opening statement of, we all have mental health. I thought it was so ironic today. I had a conversation with two friends just randomly on the phone, and they actually asked me, hey, how's your mental health? And I found myself asking other people, how's your mental health? Like as one of our opening, how are you? How's your mental health? I thought, geez, I think we really destigmatized this because that's what we know how to talk to people now. Like, how are you doing? No, like, how are you doing? Are you okay? That's become a thing, and it's because of these conversations. So I think we've come a long way. As rough as this couple years have been, I'm pretty proud of how we all talk now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's going to get better, right? The more we talk like that, the more we normalize it. And I think the more people jump on board.
Yeah. And I think that your story too is very powerful for our young people who are experiencing all those things right now and finding their identity and knowing like there is more. So thank you for just being who you are. Does anybody else have anything else they want to add before we end tonight? Because this has been, I don't know, energized me. I might go make some cookies or something now.
What kind?
I think Leslie's going to make me some. So Leslie, I'm just going to tell her to do it. That's how I do mine. Spritz, Melanie, Spritz cookies.
Yeah, Richard, you're just I love hope. Hope is yeah, it has so many different meanings for so many different people, and I love that word.
Thank you, Melanie.
And I'll also add, I really appreciated the to remember that life is temporary, right? Even this moment, and this too shall pass, right? So, so often we get identified with what we're thinking and feeling right now, but that will change too. So, such great messages. I really loved your PowerPoint. So
Thank
thanks
you,
for sharing
Sarah.
that with us.
Thank you, Sarah.
Not that this matters for the video, but I'm putting my Christmas stuff out now. You inspired me with your red sweater.
I love it. That's what it's about. Listen, I told my wife is probably ready to boot me because she knows that the tree doesn't come down till Valentine's Day. So, with that being said, I'm just glad that somebody caught wind of a little something tonight and that you're moving forward with it. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Richard. I think that you made an impact, and everybody who was on tonight, you got a dose of whatever you need to keep going. And I'm sure a lot of people will listen to this as well or watch it, because thank goodness Mark was here to record it. So
Thank you, Mark.
thank you. And thank you again to Evergreen Health and NAMI Eastside for making this possible. And we're so glad to have you on board. Thank you.